Omae wa mo shinderu. Welcome, Interworld, to the JD Videography series. I'm your host, JD, episode 9. So I've been asked the question, why did you learn Japanese? Why spend 4 years learning the Japanese language only to move to China? So I will take you back to a time of innocence, when all I knew was the world of my own backyard. Well, as I've made pretty clear by now, I was raised on video games. They are the very foundation of my life, the very core of my being. And this was especially true from 1988 to 1989, when Nintendo took over my life. Keep in mind that it was a time before the internet, and the only people I communicated with were those in my own neighborhood. Sure, I got some information from the television, but it was never really explanatory. So I just figured Nintendo, like everything else in the world, was made in the United States. There was no such thing as import or export. Countries always just made things for their own use. Sure, Nintendo is a funny word, but so is Atari. America is known for coming out with the most interesting things, so I accepted it as such. Video games were strictly an American product. Super Nintendo only cemented my suspicion, as what other culture would have the word super in their vernacular? And so I continued to live in this sheltered existence. That is, until 1995. Two things happened that year. First, my family got its first online software, America Online. This allowed me to explore the world beyond my backyard, but I'll get more into that in another video. The second thing that happened is I first experienced something truly foreign, unique, and special. Sailor Moon. My older brother first brought it to my attention. I'll get more in depth in another video, but for now, I was indeed intrigued in what I thought was the future of American animation. I was initiated. But it wasn't until the following year that I joined that cult. Not only was I greatly interested in the animation, but fell in love with the music from the series. All those beautiful English songs. The stage was set. Now, the early internet was not so well endowed with the veritable cornucopia of information that manifests today. I had to scour the depths of the World Wide Web for tidbits of information on what was now my favorite cartoon, especially the music. I searched for the names of the songs as well as lyrics, and found not only that, but full audio clips. Back in a time when no one's ever heard of MP3. I felt justified enough downloading the music and music videos of the series. I didn't think there was an album. Who puts out an album of a cartoon series? And what I found shocked me. There were other songs, non-English songs. These songs were just as beautiful, if not more so, than their English counterparts. It was then that I came to the realization: the rest of the world can create things just like America did. I learned about Japan because of Sailor Moon. And through that, I also learned that video games were of Japanese origin as well. One song, I No Senshi, or Soldier of Love, became my favorite lyrical song for a decade or more. But now I was left with a dilemma. I wanted to understand what was being sung in these songs. At the time, I also joined several groups on AOL. Groups were huge at that time. The Sailor Moon team and Final Fantasy. What I found was that some people within these groups were already well versed in Japanese, so I was far behind the curve. So in late 1996, my mother took me on one of her Borders book runs, where I found an introductory Japanese language learning guide. So I bought it, and for the next year or so, I taught myself Japanese. Mind you, there was no audio component to the guide, so my pronunciation was less than adequate. By 1997, I was fully immersed in Japanese culture after I started watching the samurai flick Zatoichi. I wanted to learn more about this amazing and unique culture. What I learned was that, contrary to popular opinion, people were not accosting each other with katanas in duels to the death. Rather, they were building cars and stereo equipment with work hours to the death. Okay, so everything there was normal, but with such beautiful history and architecture that I needed to learn more. In 1998, I graduated from high school and enrolled in college, but I had already basically finished my first year of college in high school, so I needed some other subjects to fill the time. So I added Japanese language to the repertoire. I felt I had sufficiently mastered the language to score an easy A. And it was in that first week at my university that I truly came face to face with the depths of Japanese culture. That is, anime. Before that time, I thought that Sailor Moon was the only Japanese cartoon. I had watched anime before, but now I subjected myself to every manner of cartoon, every genre of visual goodness. I immediately joined the anime club as a spectator, watching the weekly showings. I had learned more about anime in college than any other subject. In addition, video game ROMs became available for the first time, and so I started downloading scores of them. There were many Japan-only releases I felt deprived of, so I acquired them. These included the missed Final Fantasy games, Japanese Final Fantasy 2, 3, and 5, as well as various sequels like Lennis 2, and two of my favorite games, Bahamut Lagoon and Mystic Arc. All these games I played in the original Japanese language, thereby cementing my Japanese language skill. After acing 3 years of Japanese language learning, in my final year of college, I took a Japanese culture course. This involved reading various Japanese classics like Tale of Genji and Kokoro, which I later read I Am a Cat by the same author. I did a final project on an aspect of Japanese culture, Ankoku Buto, or Dance of Darkness. Well, I felt like my 4 years of college was like a dance of darkness in my life, so that was fairly appropriate. Note that I was still not planning to travel to Japan at that time, or if I did, to only spend a week or two sightseeing. I certainly had no inclination to move there. After my deplorable college years, I furthered my Japanese skill by buying a Japanese video game system, Sega Saturn, on eBay, and various games entirely in native Japanese. I started appreciating visual novels, stories written entirely in Japanese. I continued with my anime and video games throughout the early 2000s, up until 2008 when, due to the financial crisis that eventually ended my employment, caused me to forego buying any more media. So from 2008 until about 2014, there was virtually no Japanese in my life. As I said in a previous video, I became immersed in Korean culture at that time. It should just about end there, but in 2014, I met one of the most important people in my life who brought Japanese language back into my life. But I'll get more into that in a future video. In 2016, I had a resurgence in Japanese music with baby metal, lady baby, fake gear, perfume, bandmaid, Kaori Pamu Pamu, and AKB48. I was also introduced to some Japanese YouTubers. The very cute Misa sensei, who teaches Japanese language, and the extremely talented and lovely Fujiko, who does commentary and artwork online. So in that year, I moved to Japan, and that was, well, okay for a year. Then I moved back to China, and that pretty much sums it up. I'm still interested in Japan, and if I could move back there, I wouldn't hesitate. I love China as well, and Korea, and the rest of Asia. But at least in Japan, I can understand enough to get by. Japan is such a unique culture that I want to explore it more fully. So, if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you are so inclined, support me on my Patreon, link below. Thanks for your time and patience, and I'll catch you next time. 本当にありがとうございました。またねー。